Hari Ram, Hari Ram. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Krishna, Hari, 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 Ram. Ram, Ram. Hari, Hari, Hari. Krishna, Hari, Krishna, Krishna. Hari Ram, Hari Ram. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Krishna, Hari, Krishna, Krishna. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Ram, Hari. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Krishna, Krishna. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. 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 Krishna, Hari, Krishna, Krishna. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari. Padma Priya. Hare Krishna. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Ram, Hari, Ram. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. How does it work?
It's very nice. It's impressive.
Really?
I was shocked when I saw it. Like it's in the middle, and the whole garden's getting sprayed.
Really?
Yeah.
The whole garden?
Yeah, it's a full 360.
Yeah, but from the top to the bottom?
Okay, not the entire way, but a lot of it's getting
more than the other one.
Way more than the other one.
Oh, great.
So you put one in that side, one this side. The entire garden everywhere.
Great. That's really good. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Ram, Ram, Hari, Hari, Hari. Krishna, Krishna. Jai Justin, Haribol, Vilas Manjari, Sati, Pavanarada Varushna Padma Priya Ujjvala Prema. Gokul, Runesh, Swati Haribol, Suswagatam, Madhupriya, Svetlana, Haribol, Sadhvi, Kripa Siddhi, Olesa, Yamunangi, Krishna Priya, Madhumati E Rasa Priya, Mandakini, Padma Gopi, Haribol, Visyam. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Thank you. Hare, Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Okay, devotees, Hare Krishna. We're continuing on with, I think it's chapter 7 of Prabhupada-lilamrita. Oh, I don't really need this. Anyway, I'll sip a bit. Right, Prabhupada-lilamrita, chapter 7, Prabhupada in Jhansi. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasnaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadesh Tarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha, Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Yes, so devotees, Srila Prabhupada's in Jhansi, and he's formed an organization called the League of Devotees, and he's arranged to use a sort of a small temple complex type of thing with a few buildings, and apparently nice. I've not been to Jhansi. But, and Prabhupada is working so hard to spread Krishna consciousness, just non-stop, in absolutely the most sincere way possible, just morning, noon, and night, and just trying to help people become Krishna conscious and just trying to serve his spiritual master absolutely wholeheartedly. Such just fantastic sincerity and dedication. But as we know, because we know the history. Anyway, let's see. Let's see. Prabhupada, unfortunately, things really don't work out, but it doesn't stop Prabhupada. Yeah. Nothing could stop Prabhupada. Nothing. Absolutely. So remember, he went to see the owner, not exactly the owner, but what would you say? Or maybe it's the owner, actually, about getting the property, he initially arranged to use the property free, but he understood, the idea was like it was going to be Prabhupada's. Yeah, it would be handed over, actual ownership legally. But it hasn't been happening yet, although Prabhupada's using it. Prabhupada's using it freely and just every day, all day, in so many ways. So let's get into it here. Abai wanted a deed stating that the Bharati Bhavan belonged to the League of Devotees. So far, he had only a promise. Thinking of Jhansi as a permanent headquarters, he wanted a written commitment. Of course, yes. When he approached Reva Sankar Bayal for a deed of gift, Mr. Bayal gave Abai a form requesting him to pay 500 rupees to register the buildings. But since Abai had just suffered a loss of 7,000 rupees in Allahabad and had recently spent 3,000 rupees in his preaching, much of it going towards the opening day festival, he found himself unable to raise even 500 rupees. Acharya Prabhaka, despite his academic position, had very little money and was being subsidized by his parents with 3 rupees a day. Sure. Most of Abai's congregation, especially the students, were in a similar position. Mr. Bayal's request for 500 rupees didn't seem urgent, nor did he say what would happen if Abai couldn't pay. But he soon made another request. Mr. Abai Charan Day should buy the Bharati Bhavan for 5,000 rupees. It was disconcerting. The generous gift had turned into a purchase offer. The people in town were already referring to the property as Abai Bhaktivedanta's ashram, and the League of Devotees was printed in large letters across the wall of the compound. When pressed by Abai's friends, Mr. Bayal assured them that Abai could go on living there, but ultimately he would have to buy. Mr. Bayal said he would give the League of Devotees first consideration and a good price. Abai worried, not knowing what the landlord would do next. If the League could purchase the property, that would be best, but he had been unable to raise even 500 rupees. 5,000 seemed impossible. Abai found no strong financial backing from his congregation. The League did not include even a single full-time worker. He did know of one way to raise money, his pharmaceutical business. He still had a small operation being run by his son in Calcutta. Abai had formerly been earning 3,000 rupees a month. He considered approaching Godbrothers for help, but the prospects for earning the money himself seemed more likely. For 30 years he had earned money by his pharmaceutical business, and he could do it again for the most worthy cause. When he arrived in Calcutta in the spring of 1954, he was without money. He chose to live with his godbrothers at the Gaudiya Sangha in Chetla, the same neighborhood his family lived in. Since he had no money, the head of the ashram bore his expenses. Abai gave daily discourses on Srimad Bhagavatam, which the Gaudiya Sangha brahmacharis highly appreciated. Krishna Kumar Brahmachari. Even after he left, his sweet, melodious voice would ring in my ears. He used to often express a desire to go abroad and preach. One of his sons was running a small business, Vimal Tone Laboratory, and thus supporting the family. Abai knew that his wife would not be interested in his work in Jhansi. His son had been there, but had not been impressed. The family would see his preaching in Jhansi as a threat to their home life. Abai, however, was sustaining himself by his vision, which was now taking practical shape, of a world reformed by Krishna consciousness. He even thought of opening a branch of the League of Devotees in Calcutta. But inevitably he was plunged again into family responsibilities. Some of his children were still unmarried. Rent and bills had to be paid. Even if he were to develop the Vimal Tone Laboratory, the family would demand whatever he earned. And even if he were to accede to their demands, live at home and give up preaching, the greatest difficulty would still remain. They weren't serious about devotional service, nor could he change them. What was the use of conducting a business if they would not be devotees? He visited his family, and the same old scene occurred. Local friends came to visit, and Abai began preaching, giving Bhagavad Gita classes just as he had been doing in Jhansi. Meanwhile, his wife and the rest of the family would take tea in a separate room. Gosh, this is unbelievable, completely amazing. Srila Prabhupada, I wanted as much as possible to get her to work with me in spreading Krishna consciousness, to get her help. But she was very determined. She wouldn't help me in spreading Krishna consciousness. So finally, after many years, I could understand she would not be any assistance to me. She was very attached to drinking tea. I was always telling her not to drink tea because I wanted to have a nice Vaishnava family. So although I was repeatedly telling her, this time I finally said, you have to choose between me or tea. Either the tea goes or I go. In this way, I was even criticizing my own family. But because they were thinking I was the husband or father, they couldn't take my instructions seriously. So she replied, give up tea drinking or give up my husband? Well, I will have to give up my husband then. Of course, she thought I was joking. One day, Radharani made a great mistake. There was a system of barter in which a customer would place on a scale an object a shopkeeper considered valuable, and the shopkeeper would then balance it with an equal weight of merchandise. So while Abai was out, his wife took his worshipable Bhagavatam to the market and traded it for tea biscuits. When Abai came home and looked for the book, she told him what had happened. She hadn't taken the matter as a very serious thing. She was out of tea biscuits. But Abai was shocked. At first he felt depressed, but then a wave of absolute resolution passed over him. His family life was finished. When he told them he was leaving, they didn't understand what he meant. He had been leaving for 30 years. He was always coming and going. When he walked out the door, they thought, there he goes again, he's leaving. It was the usual routine. Everyone could see, even the neighbors, Mr. Day was going again. He had been at home, now he was going. He would be back again. But Abai knew he would never come back. Srila Prabhupada, before leaving my family, I wanted to get all my sons and daughters married, but some of them disagreed. But then the time is up. Never mind whether they're married or not. Let them see to their own business. Suppose I die immediately, who will take care of my daughter? At that time we say, God will take care. Then why not now? God will take care. My Guru Maharaj used to say that renunciation of family life was civil suicide. If you commit suicide, that is criminal. But that renunciation of family is voluntarily committing suicide. Now I am dead. Whatever you like, you do. Krishna says, Sarvadharman Parityajya, give up all religion. So family is Griha Dharma, the religion of the family. But Krishna says, give that up. But that attachment is there. And if we say that feeling of attachment has to be given up gradually, then that we cannot do, because the attachment is there. But if God will take care of them if I die immediately, then why not now? Unquote. His spiritual emotions were so turbulent that he wasn't thinking of going to Jhansi. He wanted to take a train to anywhere. Then he remembered some old godbrother friends who were living in an ashram in Jhargram, only a short train ride south of Calcutta. So he borrowed 10 rupees from a friend and bought a ticket to Jhargram. It was a small mutt. When Abai arrived, he was welcomed by Paramahansa Maharaj, Damodar Maharaj, and others. Paramahansa Maharaj had been present when Abai had first met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and he remembered Abai as he looked then, dressed in white khadi, looking like a Gandhian anarchist. Abai explained to him, "I couldn't fulfill my family's needs, so now let me preach the message of Lord Chaitanya." Abai told him how his business had failed and how he had willingly left his family and was now destitute. Paramahansa Maharaj. When Abai arrived, he appeared very poor, starving. He had no means. He came alone to the mutt, and when he arrived, he only chanted Hare Krishna, nothing else. Unquote. Abai spent his time in Jhargram chanting the holy name and becoming settled in detachment from his family. For several days he chanted japa almost continuously. Paramahansa Maharaj would lecture in the evenings, and then Abai would also speak on Bhagavad Gita. But as time passed, his thoughts turned again to Jhansi, and he soon felt ready to go back to the League of Devotees. He had to secure the buildings and go on with the preaching. But before returning, he obtained a large deity of Lord Chaitanya that he planned to install at the Bharati Bhavan. Ironically, he had gone to Calcutta to do business and raise money, but now he had no money, no business, and no family responsibilities. He had been married 36 years, and now at age 58, he had fully taken to the Vanaprastha order. Now he could dedicate his life fully to preaching Krishna consciousness. Abai did not adopt the saffron dress of a Vanaprastha, but continued wearing a white dhoti and kurta. The people of Jhansi had always known him as a preacher with no family, ever since he had first arrived a year and a half before. Now he was returning to them with the deity of Lord Chaitanya and a determination to establish Lord Chaitanya's temple in Jhansi. Abai met with a warm welcome from Acharya Prabhaka and others, but he also met with competition for possession of the Radha Memorial. It began with a Sanskrit conference, the Bundelkhand Sanskrit Sammelan, which brought to Jhansi the governor of the province, K.M. Munshi, and his wife Lilavati. An active social organizer, Lilavati Munshi had opened several branches of the Mahila Samiti Sangha, a society that aimed at socially uplifting women by teaching them secretarial skills and English. Two educated Jhansi ladies, Chandramukhi and Suryamukhi, wanted such a women's social program for Jhansi, and they took the opportunity to approach Lilavati Munshi during her visit. She inspired them, and they began to talk about where in Jhansi they could open one of her social centers. Perhaps, suggested one of the ladies, the Bharati Bhavan could be used. That's where Prabhupada was. Although Suryamukhi Sharma had been one of the sympathizers who had first approached Mr. Bayal on behalf of Abhay Charan Day and had asked that he be given the Bharati Bhavan for his League of Devotees, she felt that the lady's cause was more important, and she knew that Abhai's ownership of the buildings was not settled. The women agreed that the buildings would be an excellent facility for a Mahila Samiti Sangha branch, and that their cause was more urgent than Abhay Charan's. Suryamukhi, assured of support by the governor's wife, called on A.C. Bhaktivedanta. She explained that his league of worldwide Vaishnavas would never take shape. He was a nice person and she liked him, but she didn't think he could realize his extraordinary expectations. She suggested he vacate the Bharati Bhavan so that the governor's wife could organize a women's social center. You can go here and there for the sake of building a temple, she told him. You are free to travel anywhere, but these poor women in Jhansi have nothing, so they must be given these buildings for their use. She found him adamantly opposed. No, Abhay said, find another building. Abhay argued that his work was not just for a section of people, but for all living beings. Suryamukhi left frustrated. Abhay was surprised that a member of the League of Devotees was now working against him, and the maneuver was being backed by the governor's wife. Yeah, this is the story. Srila Prabhupada. After all that, this horrible thing happens. Mrs. Munshi could work at a much more influential level without having to confront Abhay directly and without us even knowing what she was doing. After she talked with Mr. Bayal, word got around that Mr. Bayal had been pressured to persuade Abhay Charan to relinquish his claim on the Bharati Bhavan. Mr. Bayal owned a cinema house in Jhansi, and there was talk that he could have a lot of difficulty with his operator's license unless Abhay Charan vacated the Radha Memorial. In December 1954, Mrs. Munshi wrote Abhay in reference to his failure to raise the 5,000 rupees. Dear Bhaktivedanta ji, she wrote, you wanted to organize there, but you could not. But I've got this institution, Mahila Samiti. Why not give it to me? Abhay was of a mind to resist. He had lawyer friends who advised him that even though he was opposed by the governor's family, he had a good case that would stand up well in court. India's tradition of respect for religious buildings was on his side. Well, that's true, even to this day. Yeah. Abhay replied to Mrs. Munshi, introducing himself as the founder of the League of Devotees. He explained the goal of the League, enclosed a copy of his prospectus, and presented many statements by prominent people, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Sri Sitaram, Raj Mahendra Pratap, and even her husband, Sri K.M. Munshi, praising the wonderful work of the League of Devotees. He also mentioned that the president of the League had recently received a 100 rupee donation in Mathura from His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Munshi himself. Abhay said that although work had been going on slowly but peacefully in Jhansi, his mind had now been bothered by Mrs. Munshi's negotiations. He requested her not to pressure anyone about his occupying the Bharati Bhavan, though he admitted, if you or any one of your agents do try, the pressure will be more weightful. I am a non-entity in that comparison. Abai hoped that by his presenting the details of his league, she would understand that his was a better cause than the Mahila Samiti. He quoted the first 3 verses of the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, wherein Lord Krishna describes how the ancient science of Bhakti Yoga is received through parampara, the order of succession from one teacher to the next, and how kings are responsible for seeing that Krishna consciousness spreads for everyone's benefit. He also argued that since, according to Bhagavad Gita, only a few amongst thousands and thousands of men endeavor for self-realization, and since the League of Devotees engaged its members in self-realization, he was providing an important and rare service. He offered to meet with Mrs. Munshi along with some 15 sannyasis from the area, and suggested that she work cooperatively with them and understand the importance of the League. The League of Devotees was benefiting all classes. As Sri Krishna had said in Bhagavad Gita, even one of a low birth can attain the shelter of the Supreme Lord. But the Mahila Samiti, Abai pointed out, was based on bodily conceptions of caste, creed, color, and sex. Therefore, it could not be as important a cause. Abai closed by requesting Mrs. Munshi not to try to occupy the Radha Memorial, which was already being used for a noble and well-appreciated cause. He signed, A.C. Bhaktivedanta, founder and secretary, League of Devotees. Aware that he was involved in an intrigue, Abai organized his thoughts and set down on paper a short history outlining important events surrounding his possession of the Bharati Bhavan. 1. I came to Jhansi sometime in October 1952. 2. I delivered some lectures at Gita Mandir on Gandhi Jayanti Day 1952. 3. Made acquaintance with Prabhupada Shastri. 4. My idea of League of Devotees implemented. 5. He took me to Reva Sankha for Bharati Bhavan. 6. Sri Reva Sankha agreed to hand over the Bharati Bhavan to League of Devotees, and he agreed to become a member of it in the presence of Prabhaka, Mitraji, and myself. 7. I write letters from Allahabad to confirm. 8. He confirmed my letter on 10th of December 1952. 9. Prabhaka intimated the desire of Reva Sankha on 1st of January 1953. 10. I got the document needed for League of Devotees and came to Jhansi for signature of the members. Reva Sankha signed and agreed to become an executive member. 11. The document was submitted for registration on the 4th of February 1953 at Lucknow, returned on 10th of October 1953. 12. The League of Devotees ceremoniously started 16th of May 53, and work began. So I'm occupying the building since then and continuing my work. Abai went on to enumerate more than 30 points, including news publicity and congratulations he'd received. He listed the story of how, he, quote unquote, came here sacrificing my business and family. I received a telegram from Allahabad instructing the news of burglary by breaking lock. I could not attend the business for work here and was closed subsequently at a loss of 7,000 rupees. Abai thought of turning to some of his sannyasi godbrothers for help. If he or they could purchase the buildings, his competitors would be silenced. He thought it worthwhile to interest his godbrothers in purchasing the buildings as an adjunct to their own missions. Vrindavan was not far away, a 4-hour train ride to Mathura, and then a short Tunga ride. He had gone there on pilgrimage in October of 1953, and had even looked at an available room in a temple near Keshi Ghat, with the idea of staying there someday. He had also traveled there several other times since he had begun residing in Jhansi. This time he went to the Imlital temple to see his godbrother Bhakti Saranga Goswami and ask if he would like to take over the proprietorship of the Bharati Bhavan so that it might be used for preaching Krishna consciousness according to the teachings of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. But Bhakti Saranga Goswami was not interested. After approaching another godbrother, Damodar Maharaj, who was also not interested in Jhansi, Abai took the short Tunga ride back to Mathura to see another godbrother, Keshava Maharaj. Keshava Maharaj was in Mathura with a group of his disciples to establish a center, but he had not yet located a suitable place. So when Abai told him about the buildings in Jhansi, he was interested. Abai and Keshava Maharaj composed a letter to Mr. Bayal, presenting their requests and the aims of their movement, and then traveled to Jhansi in a group. Abai and Keshava Maharaj with his disciples. Keshava Maharaj and his party stayed for several days in Jhansi, holding kirtans and lectures. They had an appointment with Reva Sankha Bayal, but Mr. Bayal broke it, so they had to wait to see him on another day. Meanwhile, Keshava Maharaj had time to form an opinion of Jhansi and discuss with Abai the likelihood of making this his headquarters. He noted that the people were receptive, but that the location was too remote. Even before meeting with Mr. Bayal, Keshava Maharaj felt reluctant to stake his whole mission in Jhansi. Abai agreed, aware that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had said that a preacher should go into the big cities and not practice his bhajan in seclusion, and he admitted that after 2 years in Jhansi, he had made no full-time followers. When they finally met with Mr. Bayal failed to present clear terms for purchasing the property. He said they were eligible to buy it, but he made their use of the buildings conditional. He wanted to have a say in the nature of the programs they would hold. Whew. Abai knew that this was just a further sign of shady dealings, and he suspected that Mr. Bayal was under mounting pressure to give the buildings over to the Mahila Samiti. Keshava Maharaj, having lost all interest, decided to go back to Mathura, and he invited Abai to join him. But Abai remained. Mr. Bayal wanted him out, and he even returned Abai's deposit of 210 rupees, claiming that Abai now had no justification for residing at the Bharati Bhavan. Abai noted down the latest events in his short history, 29. He has also given me a check for rupees 210 in lieu of my deposit money with him, but he has no money in the bank. The bank has returned the check with remark. 30. The money which was given to him was misappropriated by him for his own purpose, and now he is given a false check with an arrangement with the bank. 31. It is plain cheating to me from the beginning to the end. 32. I must be compensated for all the money before I can leave the buildings. But he saw it as the inscrutable will of Krishna. Events and opinions were turning him against conducting a mission in Jhansi. It no longer seemed auspicious. Srila Prabhupada, I wanted to start from here. It was a nice, big house. It was not given to me rightly, but I was using. So somehow or other, she got imagination that this house is very nice. She was the governor's wife. Through collector and through government officials, she made pressure. So, of course, there were many lawyer friends. They advised me, you do not give up. But I thought, who's going to litigate? I thought that I've left my house and now I should take up litigation? No, I don't want this house. Unquote. Abai remembered how the Gaudiya Math preachers had expended their energy for years in the courts. Having terminated his long entanglement with family and business, he had no taste for a legal fight. He could have fought, but he remembered what Keshava Maharaj had said about Jhansi's being out of the way. Of course, the whole thing had just sprung up here. Otherwise, Abai would never have chosen to establish his worldwide league in such an obscure place. The educated young men and women wished him well, just as they had good wishes for the Ladies' League, the Theosophy Society, the Arya Samaj, and many other causes. But their good intentions were certainly short of pure surrender and devotion. Even as one disciple could offer him only part-time help. But these considerations had not been sufficient to force him out. The real thing was that he was being driven out. Srila Prabhupada, if I did not leave, nobody could drive me. That was a fact. Yes, because in India, when you're in a place, you're in the place. They can't get you out. They've got to pay you. And then you don't have to accept. But they have to really pay you big money. Oh, yeah. So... But I thought, who is going to litigate these things? It is the governor's wife, and she is pressing through collector. The manager who's in charge, he had some cinema house, so they had to renew the license, and the collector pressed him that unless you arrange for this house, we're not going to renew your license. I thought, unnecessarily this man will be in trouble. I will have to pay many rupees, and she is the governor's wife, unquote. Abai decided to leave. He told his friends to carry on the League of Devotees in his absence. They were sad to see him go, And yet even some of his friends openly praised the work of the Ladies' Society and were glad to see it come. Oh, Krishna, really amazing people. They'd not been able to help him financially, although they knew he had been unable to purchase the buildings on his own. His closer followers were more affected, but he assured them that their relationship would continue. He would write letters to them, Acharya Prabhaka, Radhe Lal Malik, Mr. Mitra, Dr. Shastri, and give them instructions on what they should do. Especially Acharya Prabhaka. Abai told him he would be calling for him and expected him to continue as secretary of the League of Devotees, even if they didn't make Jhansi their main residence. Yet it was obvious that this chapter of making ambitious plans for a world movement, going from house to house and village to village, performing Sankirtan, lecturing on the Gita, distributing prasadam, this was ended. And it was not likely that he would return or that the residents of Jhansi could expect to see him again. Gosh, it's heavy. But it's the best thing ultimately. Yeah. If Prabhupada had really been stuck there, it would have been very difficult to develop the movement, too difficult. When Abai left the Bharati Bhavan with its 6-foot-high lettering, League of Devotees, painted across the outside wall, he felt sad. It had been a natural, spontaneous success for him. The young, educated people of Jhansi had looked up to him from the start, and had it not been for the intrigue, he would never have left. But he felt he had no real choice. He had come as a family man on business and was leaving as a homeless vanaprastha, forced to take shelter of Krishna. His plans were uncertain, but his desire was strong and his health good. So he moved on to Mathura, carrying with him the deity of Lord Chaitanya. Okay. Okay, we can carry on for another 5 minutes, because that's the end of that chapter. Now it's new chapter 8, New Delhi, crying alone in the wilderness. And there's a little introductory sort of paragraph. It's from a letter Srila Prabhupada wrote to the President of India, Mr. Rajendra Prasad. So Prabhupada says, I have got the clue of going back to Godhead just after leaving my present material body. And in order to take along with me all my contemporary men and women of the world, I've started my paper, Back to Godhead, as one of the means to the way. Please don't think of me as something wonderful or a madman when I say that I shall go back to Godhead after leaving my present material body. It is quite possible for everyone and all of us. Unquote. Okay. When Abai arrived in Mathura, he sought out Keshava Maharaj, who was now establishing his mat, and presented him with the deity of Lord Chaitanya. At Keshava Maharaj's request, Abai agreed to stay there and edit the Gaudiya Patrika. Abai was given a room, and for the first time, aside from brief visits, he lived in a mutt with his godbrothers. As a senior, experienced devotee, Abai held classes and instructed the brahmacharis, who were young, uneducated, and even illiterate, in the disciplines of devotional service and the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. He had only recently begun his duties when Bhakti Saranga Goswami, another sannyasi godbrother, asked Bhaktivedanta Prabhu to assist him in New Delhi at his ashram, Gaudiya Sangha. Both Keshava Maharaj and Bhakti Saranga Goswami recognized Abai as accomplished writer and editor and wanted to work with him. It was accepted amongst Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhu was an expert preacher and writer, whether in English, Hindi, or Bengali. Now, Keshava Maharaj wanted Abai to stay and work on the Gaudiya Patrika, while Bhakti Saranga Maharaj, who had to go to Bengal, was requesting him to come to Delhi to produce the harmonist, known as Hindi as Sajjana Toshini. Abai was agreeable to Bhakti Saranga Goswami's proposition, and Keshava Maharaj consented on the condition that Abai also continued to edit the Gaudiya Patrika, at least by mail. As an editor, Abai was in his element, and he was happy to preach in cooperation with his godbrothers. Although Abai didn't consider himself an accomplished scholar or author, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had been pleased by his writings and had encouraged him to continue. And now these senior sannyasis of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati were turning to him for help. They were practically competing to see who would get the benefit of his services. Perhaps, Abai thought, this should be his life's work, serving humbly under the direction of his godbrothers. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.